Welcome to episode 73 of the Geekly. My name is Jules.
I'm Leks.
Today we're talking about Altered Carbon Season 1, we're talking about Picard, and we're talking about Legends of Tomorrow. I saw Sonic this week. It was unfortunately very boring. I went there expecting a terrible story, but loads of fan service and loads of lore, and there just wasn't that much fan service or lore, but there was a terrible story. So
1 out of 3, you know.
Yeah, I've got a lot of confidence they could actually think, right, people actually want to see this film and build it into a really good second film, but I just feel like it cannot be set on planet Earth. It's got to be kind of on Sonic's planet or where.
So, I'm not really familiar with, the Sonic lore, so it's not on Earth?
I mean, the games, I don't think they specify the planet, but Sonic's home planet is Mobius. And obviously Robotnik is a human, so, I haven't thought about these things in 25 years, but it's set on a different planet, and I just feel like doing a road trip movie on planet Earth where the road trip had no kind of resemblance of anything that's ever happened in the Sonic games was a bit of a strange decision, and I just want to see him running around in his world, really lean into what Sonic is and what he's about and his world, bring some of his kind of other characters in.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of concept art on Twitter for other Sonic characters for future films and people trying to guess what they'll look like based on what Sonic's like, and some fan requests of characters they really want to see. I think Knuckles is a big one.
Oh yeah. But it still hasn't broken even. So it's that moment we're still kind of wondering what's going on inside Paramount Studios. Will they? Won't they? Anyway, let's crack on with the important things of the day. Let's talk about Altered Carbon Season 1. Talk to me, Leks, about Altered Carbon Season 1.
I think they've done a really, really excellent job with the world building and the whole concept of identity being mutable and immortality is really interesting. And what they've done with the meths and the grounders has really, really kind of illustrated the economic disparity that exists in our world today. It's just kind of exaggerated, and you can see exactly how the rich would go after immortality and become these kind of godlike oppressors. I also really liked that Kel was responsible for the stacks, and then she realized it was a bad idea and was actively fighting against them and didn't want to live again. So yeah, there are a lot of really interesting concepts in here, a lot of really interesting characters. I just felt like the pacing at the end kind of got a little wonky.
I really like this show. I think other than House of Cards and Better Call Saul and some of the Netflix Marvel, this is probably my third or fourth kind of favourite Netflix original out of everything they've ever done. I think visually it looks stunning, and it feels like the future. It feels like a kind of Blade Runner style future. Where you've got the flying cars and you've got these kind of uploadable consciousness idea. And it was just a world that I loved being in. And I think you're right, the world building and the lore and the idea of these kind of other planets that, mankind has kind of colonized. It just felt like a really interesting, well fleshed out world.
And they managed to do the world building without a lot of exposition, which is a pretty difficult thing to do. I mean, pretty much any creator who does any world building will kind of tell you at some point you're just going to have to suck it up and have a bit of exposition, but you don't really get that in the show, and yet you do get a very real, the world they exist in is very tangible. I didn't feel like I was struggling to understand any of the concepts they were dealing with. The technology was very effortlessly explained. It all seemed really seamless and natural. I loved Poe. I was really sad when Poe died.
Can we just agree that Poe as a character and as a concept was the best part of the show?
Definitely. Absolutely.
We'll dive into this quickly. It had two of the things I love. In the show occasionally there'll be this excuse for why there's unlimited money. Even something like Sunny and Philly. Frank Reynolds is this business millionaire, genius. So they always have infinite money. So you get that on day one. And on the other side, you've got something like the TARDIS in Doctor Who. It's this permanent kind of fortress with infinite possibilities. So those are two tropes I kind of look out for on TV sometimes. And you had Bancroft's money, so Kovacs always had infinite money. And then they had this fortress called the Raven, which is like an AI-run hotel. And he hadn't had a guest in 4 decades, did he say?
Yeah, because nobody stayed there because apparently the AIs went a little bit nuts and were I think probably 3 or 4 times they were referred to as crazy girlfriends because they just got really obsessed with their guests. And you can see that with Poe. He was always can I help? Can I help?
Yeah. it was fantastic the first time he went in, I think. Kovac was being trailed by these 3 or 4, 5 guys, and they were all going to kill him. And Poe's very like delicately saying, if you pay me, you unlock a whole range of my services. And as soon as he was like, he wasn't quite bleeding out, but he was heavily beaten. He was crawling towards the front desk. He just put his hand on this monitor. And suddenly Poe, this shotgun appears from nowhere. These turrets appear from the ceiling.
I have to say, when every time Poe pulled out the shotgun, I loved it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I'm absolutely in love with this character. He's my favorite character in the whole series.
Oh, absolutely.
I really hope they bring him back because I was so invested in his character journey. And the fact that they managed to have an AI character who had a character arc.
Yes.
Because he's essentially a side character. And a lot of times side characters get kind of thrown by the wayside. They don't have a lot of development or whatever. But Poe was very self-reflective and he learned lessons and he even kind of sacrificed himself at the end. It was a really kind of meaningful story arc.
Yeah, so that was kind of the fortress that they would return to. I mean, we should probably talk about the plot slightly. It's the whole thing is like a noir cyberpunk TV show. He's hired as...
he's not just hired, because he's a prisoner.
Yeah.
And he gets sold to Bancroft, or leased to Bancroft, in the body of this cop who's been framed that has a connection to Ortega. So he's kind of forced into working for Bancroft. He makes very liberal use of Bancroft's money. I mean, like, he's quite willing to throw it around here and there. He's just like, yeah, well, Bancroft will pay for it, which I thought was kind of a cool attitude to have. I would probably do the same if this, like, super rich billionaire gave me unlimited funds. It would be like, yeah, I want that, that.
And this was his, Takeshi Kovach's third body. And he's an envoy, which was a really interesting concept that I liked as well. And he has this ability to kind of... Well, it's shown in the show as him seeing through walls. He can see people as they're kind of approaching, and he has this intuition, this sense of intuition. That seemed like the perfect match-up for somebody that, Bancroft wants him to solve this murder, and happens to be Bancroft's own murder, which is a delicious little twist in the first episode. And so we had across the 10 episodes, it was basically him solving this murder.
I love the kind of noir detective stories. I love the cyberpunk aesthetic.
Oh, yeah.
I really love future worlds that are grungy and imperfect, like Blade Runner, like Altered Carbon, that kind of show humanity has not been its best.
You want a city called Neo something?
Yeah.
That's the one.
So yeah, this aesthetic is like my bread and butter. I love it. So it is kind of no surprise that I'm got really into this show.
Let's talk about Kovac. He's been taken off ice to solve this case, and he happens to be put into the body of Ortega, who is kind of the main female protagonist of the show. Her boyfriend, who was framed for... I can't remember what he was framed for.
The murder of that prostitute.
And so we see kind of the lives of Takeshi Kovac, all 3 of them. We get some flashbacks to other things he's done. But I've got to be honest, like Joel Kinnaman, the only other things I've seen him in are House of Cards, where he was kind of a Boy Scout, and Suicide Squad, where he was just this one-dimensional grunt kind of guy. I thought he was so good in this.
He was so good in this. Like, I was disappointed that Kovac left his body.
Yeah.
And I really hope we get to see Riker.
I really hope we get to see Riker as well. That would be such a great twist, because it kind of, like with American Horror Story, it's the same cast every year, but the story changes. We're going to have the same story, but with kind of a revolving cast instead, which is a great idea, but they've sown seeds for like people coming back in the future.
Well, like the kind of brilliant thing is that it's kind of got the Doctor Who effect,
yes,
where it doesn't matter what the actors are doing,
yeah,
the characters can stay, and we can always have the same characters. And I think one of the strengths of the show is that like it has got some really talented actors in the show. One of the ones that stood out the most to me was he played 3 different characters. The tattooed punk guy. The first time we see him, he's just been arrested. This nameless thug, covered in tattoos, big, huge, bald guy, really intimidating and rough looking. He gets in a scuffle with Ortega and she knocks him out. It also happens to be All Hallows Eve and Day of the Dead, and her family's getting ready for celebration, and there's some debate over their grandmother's recipe. So what she does is she spins up her grandmother into this like thug's body, and you have him going around with kind of a really believable Spanish accent, really believable mannerisms of this elderly Spanish woman in this like huge guy's body, and I was just watching him thinking like, God, he's a fucking amazing actor. I've never seen him in anything else, but his ability to like adopt different personas, because then he gets taken over by somebody else later on, does another accent, like totally believable. So you have like 3 completely disparate characters, and this guy just like killed all of them. And I was amazed every time I saw him. I wanted to see him do more characters because I was just like massively impressed with his ability.
Yeah.
And you see Kovacs do that as well. It's not the same thing. He pretends to be a middle-aged woman.
Ava,
yeah. And like his manners, the tonal quality of his voice changes. Like it's such an amazing transformation, and like I loved watching the actors portray different characters like that. And the idea we never really knew who anybody was. Like there's a bit where Ortega gets taken over by Kovacs' sister, and he doesn't realize it at first, and then she kind of gives the game away, and again, the actress, 2 totally different characters, just absolutely nailed both of them. And so it's probably like great direction, great actors, amazing writing.
Yeah,
it's kind of got everything. Really.
Yeah, like, and after Suicide Squad, I hadn't like condemned Joel Kinnaman to like the bin of like history, but this really like was very, very good. And the bit at the end, double sleeving, is when it's like a 3D printer basically. You print another version of yourself, and there was consciousness in both of them. And when he was talking to himself, having double sleeved, I thought that was really good as well. And there was a sense that in the very final scene they were dressed differently, but you didn't know who was who.
And we still don't really know which one of them died and which one lived. I mean, Kovacs told Ortega that he was the one who said goodbye to her, but was he telling the truth?
Yeah.
Like, we don't know.
Mm.
We didn't get to see which decision they made or who won, because they played rock, paper, scissors, and it was like 3 out of 5, but they kept it's the same person, so they kept doing the same move.
I want to talk about Ortega. She was great. I found it odd that she was constantly sexualized, like in every scene she was in. We had Joel Kinnaman in the shower twice. One was to wash off like the gunge and to see all these other people coming off ice as well. And then he had another shower and we saw him kind of from the back where he was like washing blood off himself. Then we would get Ortega in the shower for no reason, where we kind of saw everything. We would get them having sex, she was topless. She would walk across the room, she would come back like full frontal nudity. I didn't think any of that was ever necessary.
No.
Like,
there was a lot of unnecessary female nudity in this show. Most of the women were at least partially naked throughout most of it. And a lot of them were prostitutes, and you could make the argument, well, they're dressing like prostitutes or whatever. They're trying to lure customers in. But even Bancroft's wife, Miriam, her dresses were basically see-through.
Yeah. It was like tissue paper
kind
of situation.
It's like, why are you even wearing clothes?
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of one of the points where it falls down, is that it is a bit sexist and misogynistic. Although we did get one kind of throwaway full frontal of a John at the Head in the Clouds place. But the women were very, very hypersexualized in this.
Yeah, and it was one of Bancroft's kind of, fetishes or whatever, was that he would have like consensual non-consent, but he would kill them essentially. He would take it so far that he would kill them, then he'd buy them new sleeves. So the stack was taken out, put into the new sleeve, but then later on you find out that he would make that promise to people, but it would be they would actually be dying rather than being able to be re-sleeved. So women were seen kind of as dispensable for a lot of this. When I think of noirs, I always think about the damsel in distress firstly, but also the kind of young virginal person who's been killed almost immediately in the thing. And they did lean into that, but you almost felt that this is like a 21st century take on that, so they maybe could have made other decisions, but they kind of were very true, I guess, to noir storytelling, which maybe wasn't the right decision.
I think the decision to like hypersexualize all the women was really sort of gearing the show more towards a male audience. We're doing Westworld in the next couple weeks, and I've started watching it, and there's like shitloads of nudity in that, but it's not sexual nudity. You just have the hosts kind of sitting around naked. Every time I watch it, I kind of marvel at the actors being able to be so comfortable. I mean, because there's like hundreds of people sitting there staring at them, and they're just sitting there naked having to do their performances, and that's got to be a little bit like self-conscious and stuff. And so you have a show like Westworld where it doesn't have a lot of nudity, but it's not that hypersexualized thing. And then you compare it to Altered Carbon, and you kind of look at the nudity of the women and think, it's not really necessary. This is a very kind of male-focused show catering primarily to a male audience, when they could have very easily just slid a little bit to the left and not had that distinction.
Yeah, I think what you probably needed was like one in like Head in the Clouds or somewhere, like one prostitute like topless, but you never. I mean, I don't really think you needed Kovac having sex with Bancroft's wife, or him really getting with Ortega, because obviously
I didn't really like the relation.
I didn't either.
I didn't really buy it. Mostly because her boyfriend had just been sent off, and granted, it's her boyfriend's body, so it probably had like complicated feelings for her. But I didn't buy that she kind of fell for Kovac, or they had that kind of relationship. I liked them better as collaborators and partners.
Yeah, if Reich had been permanently killed, or like was it called like permadeath or something?
Real death.
You could understand it, but he is back now. Like at the end of the series, like they talked about him being, he's not framed anymore. He's been taken off ice, and he's been given his body back. So I just think they shouldn't have got together for starters. But I also really didn't think him getting with Miriam Bancroft developed the plot in any way at all either. Uh-huh. So in both sequences, you got like almost total nudity from the women, and that wasn't necessary. But there was a lot involving prostitution. So yeah, okay, fine. You get like one topless woman like in Head in the Clouds, or I can't remember the name of the other place they went to, but that was probably enough. But so there, like you said, there was just a lot of really unnecessary nudity that served no purpose. Yeah, it was very jarring, I thought.
And particularly because there were male prostitutes, but they were not as scantily clad as the women. I kind of feel, equal opportunity. If the women are going to be naked, the men should be naked too.
Going back to Ortega, which is how we started on this bit, I've got to be honest, I didn't give two shits about her till about episode 8, because I just felt her character development was very uneven. She would bitch about everything, and then she would look at Kovac with a smirk on her face, stop bitching. And then she would be so desperate to be involved in the case. And then she was invited to the big party, and she was very resistant to being invited to the party. Her characterization, I just felt, was pretty wonky throughout the whole thing. I also didn't really feel it necessary for us to have so much time with her and her family.
I think her motivations were very flip-floppy.
Yeah.
Right from the very beginning, she was kind of obsessed with Kovac. And the Riker thing sort of felt like an afterthought. I think we were episode 5 or 6 before we found out that he was in her boyfriend's body, and then it was oh, that's why she gives a shit so much. Whereas before, she seemed like she had this weird obsession with Kovac, and she kept calling him a terrorist and kept trying to justify her interest in him on the fact that Bancroft had let this terrorist just walk the streets. And particularly since her stepfather was her partner, I feel like there were plenty of opportunities for him to kind of be I know why you're obsessed with this guy, but it's not really healthy, and kind of drop a few little clues along the way that she had more of an interest in Kovac's body than Kovac himself. I guess not really his body, but
yeah,
Riker's body, whatever. The sleeve he was in.
Sleeve, yeah.
So yeah, I felt that damaged her character development a lot, and she didn't really hit her stride until kind of around the conflict in Head in the Clouds with Kovac's sister.
That's a good time to move over to the sister. I didn't honestly think her motivations were that clear or believable. It got a bit like Jamie Cersei Lannister at points. I've got to be honest, between the two of them. She was, I did this for you, killing all his friends and stuff.
Even the story about how she came back, it was total chance event, was just kind of, it was very much Deus Ex Machina. She just happened to be found by this archaeologist who just happened to have DNA material along with her stack, and he recreated her and blah, blah, blah. And it was just kind of I don't buy that. And then, it came out that Protectorate had kind of bought her off and given her huge amounts of wealth for her to just kind of go and do whatever she wanted with. And that as well felt kind of thin and insubstantial. We didn't really get a lot of her personality in the early days. We got a lot of Kovac. I mean, we pretty much saw everything through his perspective for the most part. There were a few scenes with other characters, but mostly we saw from Kovac's perspective. Most of the flashbacks were from Kovac's perspective. And his sister was always kind of just there in the background. And so then when it got to the point where she's kind of trying to win him over, she didn't have a personality.
Yeah.
She was just a killing machine, basically. And maybe that was the intention they wanted to go with, and to show that how she had changed by living for so long. Because at this point she's like 300 years old, and Kovac is too, but for that 250 years he's been unconscious, so it doesn't really count. But that was a big thing about limits, and how the meths no longer had limits to what they were doing, because they lived for so long they got bored, and they kind of killed indiscriminately, and Raylene even referred to the grounders as fireflies, that their lives were just these little sparks, and she seemed to delight in killing them to prove to Kovac that they were unimportant.
I liked the venue for the final fight. It felt very computer gamey. And in a week, I've already spoken about Sonic. It felt like, a Robotnik base in the clouds, which is frequently how Sonic games would end. I liked the little group he'd assembled around himself. Thought they were all pretty helpful. I liked Lizzie coming back for that final act.
Lizzie was such a badass.
Yeah,
I mean, her performance as well. She went from being this absolutely traumatized, nearly catatonic person to like a full-on badass in the course of the series, and the actress was absolutely believable in all of it.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed this. I thought all the episodes kind of felt quite unique. Like we returned to the Raven quite a lot. We went back to Bancroft's house quite a lot, but every episode felt like we were learning more about this really wonderful world. And I think it was a great reading on the idea of gender, the idea of race, and the idea that it's just packaging. We are who we are underneath all of it. And I just love the idea that Kovac is going to go from it's going to be 3 different races and 3 different kind of lives. And season 2 comes out on Thursday, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to feel like an entirely new show, even though it's the exact same character. It's pretty special TV, and I really enjoy it, and I recommend this to a lot of people. So
should we move on to Picard, which has been a bit controversial this week, at least as far as Star Trek Twitter is concerned. This week's episode started out with 7 of 9 kind of doing a raid on this facility that was extracting parts from former Borg people. We see Icheb, who we haven't seen since Star Trek Voyager. He was a Borg kid that Voyager kind of rescued along with 2 others, and Seven sort of mentored him in her sort of Vulcan-like Borg way. And they had a really sort of like intense moment where he was essentially dying, and she was trying to save him, and he was just kind of like, no, like there's no point, just kill me. And she broke down and referred to him as her child, but she did eventually kill him, and Twitter just kind of went nuts with that, like all of the Icheb fans. And like I love him as much as the next person, but I was more excited just to see him. Like he popped up, and I was like, oh, I know who that is. And I kind of feel like it was an important moment for Seven's character. I can sort of understand that people are upset that the original actor wasn't cast to play him, even though he'd mentioned that he wanted to reprise the role. And he was only in there for a few minutes, but it was a really, really important moment to show us how Seven had developed since her Voyager days. So she's much more human, much more emotional.
Maybe give us some insight into 7 of 9, because some people may not be aware of the character.
So 7 of 9 was found in the Delta Quadrant, because that's where Voyager kind of got stuck, and she was rescued from a Borg ship. But because she was a child when she became a Borg, and she's human, which was another odd thing. It was like, how the fuck did a human get to the Delta Quadrant? Which they never really explained. So they were kind of like all through Voyager rehabilitating Seven and teaching her how to be a human, because she'd basically been Borg her entire life. She was like 7 or 8 when the Borg caught her. She has like a ridiculous number of cybernetic implants in her body because she was so young when she became Borg. It was easier for them to like connect the Borg elements to her organic tissue. And so she's kind of a very unique, prized individual in certain circles because of that. All through her Voyager days, she was very much kind of like the Data character, the Spock character, the like very, I feel things but I don't understand them kind of person. She had a really cool relationship with Janeway as well, who acted as kind of like her human mentor and sort of took her under her wing. And so now we see her, she's a Ranger, who they kind of go around and help people who nobody else will help. She's very human in Picard, which I think was an interesting move for them to make. They showed a good progression of her over the past 20 years since the last time we saw her. So I found that to be an interesting twist. I hope we get to see more of her. She's one of my favorite characters from Voyager. Probably like one of the few good points about Voyager. So yeah, like seeing kind of Janeway in Nemesis. It was cool to get some 7 of 9 in Picard.
Yeah. I personally thought she just elevated the whole show up several levels. The fact that she's not going to be recurring, I thought she may be recurring. I kind of felt sad about that. I thought she just brought a whole new dimension to the show. Cast a real shadow, to be honest, a lot across quite a few of the crewmates. And I really enjoyed the caper. They went to, they were going to trade 7 of 9 for Bruce Maddox. And she got there and she basically was like, yeah, that's not what's happening. I'm here for this bitch who killed Icheb.
Yeah.
And they kind of said, no, let's retreat. We don't want Picard and L0 to be kind of fugitives. We have to, lose the battle to win the war. And they beamed off and she beamed straight back and just killed this bitch, which I thought was so good. I liked that Rios, I felt like he was hinting to her and he was trying to help her out. And he left I can't remember what the name of the device was. I got it written down somewhere. And she kind of took his lead. And this was all kind of happening like above Picard, like behind his back. And again, it's interesting to see Picard in this new light as someone that's doesn't quite. It's almost like he doesn't quite command the respect.
It's one of the things that I find most interesting about this show, and it's also another thing that Star Trek Twitter has been complaining about because they don't feel that Jean-Luc Picard in Picard is the character they remember, and he's not. Time has passed. I was talking about this on Sunday after I watched the episode. He's had his faith betrayed. He was a person who really believed in the ideals and aims of Starfleet and really believed that they were a force for good to kind of unify the universe and help the weak and explore and discover new cultures. And he was an archaeologist, a philosopher, and very cultured, and gave these like very eloquent speeches, and he commanded respect wherever he went. He was an accomplished diplomat. He became an admiral, and then he kind of laid his career on the line to save the Romulans, and Starfleet basically said, all right, see ya, which was a really crushing blow for him. And he kind of retreated from all of the people that were close to him until now, and he's trying to reconnect with them, and most of them are kind of like, look, dude, you bailed on us. You gave up. You just went on and lived on your vineyard and did your own thing, and you left the rest of us holding the bag, and you didn't really think about that, and now you want us to be friends again? It's not going to happen. And it's really interesting to watch this person who throughout his entire life has had immense power and privilege suddenly not have that anymore, and he's not adjusting well to it at all. He's still trying to be that commanding figure who's in charge of everything. And I think the little caper that they went on illustrates that perfectly. He was kind of,
what was he fucking... what was the character he was playing? It was incredible.
It was something like smarmy French stereotype.
Yeah.
But he wasn't really taking it completely seriously. It was very much kind of a throwback to his captain days of we're gonna, I've got my crew around me. We're gonna go and pull off this deception, and everything's gonna be fine, and the good guys are gonna win the day. Meanwhile, Seven has this completely different plan that totally undermines him. And even after he talks her off the ledge, and they have this kind of moment about both being Borg on the ship. And she says, I'm going to go back to my Ranger days, and I just need to borrow a couple blasters from you, and everything will be fine, and I'm working for my humanity. But instead she beams down and kills the bitch that she wanted to kill in the first place. Just shows how much control he's lost. And I really like that dynamic.
I thought this is the best episode, and I felt that because Jurati, L0, and Raffi were kind of sidelined. And I like that Rios, 7 of 9, and Picard were kind of at the forefront. I just find them slightly more dynamic than the other ones, and I think they worked kind of well as a team. I also think the fact that there was no Borg cube stuff to kind of distract us or kind of dilute the narrative helped as well. But I think this episode probably struck the best balance. There's been a lot of conversations, a lot of reminiscing. People just sat in chairs, just, what are we going to do? And it was about people of action in this episode. It wasn't, let's not talk about it, let's just fucking do it. And I appreciated that a lot. I know Picard's more a let's talk about it kind of guy, but I just think you have to break that up occasionally. And I think the injection of 7 of 9 was a really good idea. the character brought a whole new element to this episode, so I really liked it. Why did Jurati kill Maddox, Leks?
That is a good question. She's sort of an interesting character. Like we've commented before that up until now she's kind of been played for laughs. She's a little bit neurotic. She's not super confident. It was kind of questionable why she was coming on the voyage to begin with, because she's basically a science geek who's been working on synths in an environment where synths have been banned, so she's not really doing anything except for theoretical research. And so, because they needed Bruce Maddox to kind of find Daj's sister, and for reasons unknown, Jurati has taken Maddox off the board at presumably great personal loss to her, because they had a relationship, and she didn't kind of like cruelly and coldly kill him. Like, she was kind of breaking down, sobbing as she did it, and he died in a pretty horrible manner. Like, I mean, it was long and excruciating. He didn't just go to sleep or get knocked out or anything. He like disintegrated basically.
I look forward. I think she's clearly got some kind of dark side. I look forward to seeing that come to light. Final point from me. L0T is already tiresome as the comic relief. I don't know. It just, in the way that 7 of 9 shitting on Picard's plan, and he was dressed in a way that might befit like the Next Generation, that kind of occasional lighter tone, and her destroying his plan was kind of like, we're not having that tone, we're a more serious show. It makes me kind of think that L0T as comic relief just isn't necessary at all, and they're playing it up too much. Like, we get he speaks the truth, we get it, but I'd need something to kind of alter with that slightly.
The thing about Star Trek is every single iteration has to have an L0T type of character. We've got...
I was hoping you wouldn't say that, but okay.
We've got Spock in the original series. We've got Data in Next Generation. I forget who it is in Deep Space Nine. We have 7 of 9 and Tuvok in Voyager. We've got...
So Worf is quite funny at times as well.
Yeah.
More the butt of the joke.
The joke. But again, that very sort of serious, solemn figure in the background. Even Enterprise had a Vulcan first officer. And I sort of feel like it's a trope they can't get away from. It's like, we have to have a super analytical, super logical character in every scene to balance out a super emotional captain. And
this feels like the jump from Next Generation to Picard, to me, honestly feels like the jump from Roger Moore to Daniel Craig in terms of James Bond, where Daniel Craig doesn't do the one-liners anymore. So I just think that's something they may need to evolve out of sooner or later. That's just my personal preference, but I'm not a lifelong Star Trek fan like you, but...
I go back and forth. Like, part of me is like, I mean, it's almost like the red shirt thing. And so part of me sort of appreciates that they have this kind of recurring joke through every series. Another part of me is like, oh God, do we have to have another character like that? Like, how many different storylines can you do with a character like that? So I think they're going to have to do some really heavy lifting with L0T to make him a compelling character, particularly because we just had 7 of 9, and they've already done that heavy lifting with her.
If he could take a vow of silence and just be the samurai, he would probably be my favourite character. Okay, let's move over to Legends. I'm going to give us 60 seconds for this because nothing really happened. Genghis Khan wants Prince Charles to give him Hong Kong. Woo! And that doesn't happen, basically.
Charlie turns out to be one of the fates. Like, where the fuck did that come from?
I know. John's dying of lung cancer. They try all manner of things to fix him. Anyway, Astra winds back the little dial in the coin thing to give him more time. I have to
say that just felt so contrived to me.
What a fucking waste.
I don't remember her story exactly from the Constantine show. I know that she was a little girl and she grew up in hell.
And now she's like one of the bosses in hell. You'd think she has other people just like John Constantine who could do it, but she doesn't. She's just toying with Constantine. Fair enough.
I mean, to be fair, he is the reason she's in hell. I mean, I guess she holds a grudge.
So why doesn't she just kill him? Why do this unwinding bullshit anyway? Charlie and the brother, Nate and Zari, Ray and Nora, Mick and the woman, Sarah and Ava.
Why does everybody have to be paired up?
Even for CW standards, this is absurd.
Literally everybody in the show is being paired up.
I could add Gary and Constantine to that list as well.
Gary's kind of Constantine's sidekick now, so they're always sort of together. There's this weird couple-y vibe between the two of them.
I said it 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think that Nora and Ray aren't the only couple that are going to leave. I think at least one other couple will go, and we'll get a proper reshuffle for season 6.
I think we're going to get rid of Zari's brother and keep Zari.
So Charlie and the brother, do you think they could go off together in some way?
Possibly, because Charlie's been away quite a bit this
Yeah.
season. She just keeps going off to different places. This has been the first episode since Crisis that we've really seen Charlie through a substantial part. So yeah, I think they're potentially setting it up that the two of them might go off together.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I think that's all we've got time for this week. Join us next week. We'll be talking about season 2 of Altered Carbon. More Picard. I'm going to find us something to watch instead of Legends of Tomorrow. Even though the cupboards are bare at the moment in January and February, I'm going to find us something else to watch. So, see you next week.
See you next week.